This is VOA Africa.
Hello, I'm Esther Githui-Ewart. It's Thursday, August 20th. This is Africa 54. Due to the global outbreak of COVID-19, Voice of America is taking every necessary precaution to safeguard its employees. So our broadcast will look a little different today and in the near future as we, out of an abundance of caution, reduce our staffing at VOA headquarters here in Washington. We're working to help keep you informed about what's going on, and we appreciate you staying with us on Africa 54. The soldiers who wrested control of Mali from President Ibrahim Boubacar Keita are promising to oversee a transition towards democracy, but it remains unclear who is behind the government takeover. Lucy Fielder reports.
The soldiers who ousted Mali's president in a military coup promised on Wednesday they'd oversee a transition to elections within a reasonable time and promised to restore stability. This was a day after they detained President Ibrahim Boubacar Keita at gunpoint and drove him to nearby Kati military base, where their mutiny started. There they forced him to resign and dissolve parliament. It still isn't clear who is leading the revolt, which drew immediate condemnation around the world. But this was the spokesman for the mutineers, who call themselves the National Committee for the People's Salvation.
Mali is sinking into chaos, anarchy and insecurity, mostly due to the fault of the people who are in charge of its destiny. True democracy doesn't rhyme with complacency, nor with weakness from the state authority. The state must guarantee its citizens' freedom and security.
Late on Tuesday, anti-government protesters poured into a central square in Bamako to cheer the putschists as they drove through in military vehicles. Mass protests had been calling for Keita to resign in recent weeks, blaming him for corruption and worsening security in the northern centre, where jihadists are waging an insurgency. Keita came to power in 2013 following another coup, declaring the days of military mutiny over. In 2018, he won re-election, promising to root out corruption and deal with the militants. He enjoyed strong international support, especially from France, which poured money and troops into Mali. But that support and his strong majority may have blinded him to the depths of public anger, fueled by disputed elections in April and an anemic economy.
That was Lucy Fielder of Reuters reporting. Ibrahim Boubacar Keita's ouster late Tuesday followed weeks of large anti-government demonstrations in Bamako. Experts say what happens next is really anybody's guess for a country that has been marred by years of conflicts and instability. VOA's Mariama Diallo explains.
Ibrahim Boubacar Keita, or Ibeka as he's known, has been in power since 2013. He said he had no choice but step down.
For 7 years, I had happiness and the joy of trying to redress this country throughout my best efforts.
In a statement carried out overnight on state TV, the soldiers behind Tuesday's military coup identified themselves as the National Committee for the Salvation of the People, led by the Colonel Major Ismaël Ouagé.
Mali descends into chaos day by day, anarchy and insecurity because of the fault of the people in charge of its destiny. Real democracy doesn't go with complacency.
Demonstrators had demanded Keita's resignation during frequent anti-government protests that began in early June. Jude Moore is a senior policy fellow at the Center for Global Development in Washington. Moore served as deputy chief of staff to former Liberian President Ellen Johnson Sirleaf.
When the protests first started, the protests were really about increasing the salaries of teachers and doctors. And as the protests continued without a response from the government, the demands of the protests expanded. They became more expansive. Then they included the failed parliamentary elections. There was a perception that there was deep corruption within his administration and a significant amount of nepotism.
Joe Scheuer, Mali resident representative for the UN Development Program, UNDP, told VOA from Bamako that while there is no justification for a coup, it's important to note that underlying issues go back many years.
The conflict in the country that go back in terms of decades of unrealized development opportunities and grievances people have in terms of access to basic services, a lack of rule of law, and so on. You have the events following the Arab Spring, the coup in 2012 in Mali, the ensuing establishment of international terrorist groups in the country and in the sub-region, and of course the miscontent as well in terms of the recent elections that are seen as not being 100% fair. On top of that, the security situation with a number of massacres over the last 18 months.
The coup has been strongly condemned by the international community, including the African Union, the West African Bloc, ECOWAS, and the United Nations, which has peacekeeping troops in the country. Instability in Mali is even more concerning given the number of elections coming up in West Africa, says more.
Côte d'Ivoire, Guinea, Burkina Faso, Niger, Ghana. So we have 5 elections coming up. 2 of those elections represent issues. In Côte d'Ivoire and in Guinea, we have presidents who are going for a 3rd term. And those are already beginning to raise questions. So for ECOWAS, the stability of the region is really, really important.
Keita was democratically elected in 2013 and was serving a 2nd term when he was ousted this week. Mariama Diallo, VOA News.
Leaders of the Economic Community of West African States are meeting Thursday in an emergency session on the political crisis in Mali. The leaders are expected to get a briefing from former Nigerian President Goodluck Jonathan, who, as ECOWAS Special Envoy, attempted to mediate the Mali crisis. The international community is calling for the release of President Keita, currently being held by Mali's military junta. ECOWAS has said that the only constitutional means of taking power condoned by the group is through the ballot box. Aderemi Ajibewa, ECOWAS Political Affairs Director, says the leaders are condemning the overthrow of President Keita and urging the mutineers to release the president and several members of his government. The United States is strongly condemning the coup in Mali. U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo is calling on all political and military actors to work towards a restoration of constitutional government. In a statement released Wednesday, Pompeo said, quote, "We urge all stakeholders in Mali to engage in peaceful dialogue, to respect Malians' rights to freedom of expression and peaceful assembly, and to reject violence." Sectarian violence in Nigeria's Kaduna state has lingered for decades, claiming thousands of lives and forcing thousands more from their homes. In late July, gunmen killed at least 43 people, making it 178 people killed so far in the southern part of Kaduna since the start of the year. The Nigerian government has deployed more security forces, but local community leaders and rights groups accuse authorities of willful neglect. Timothy Obiezu reports from a village in Kaduna that was recently attacked.
Kurumi-Masara village in southern Kaduna state is the latest hotspot for the persistent violence in the region. Tens of people were killed here during an overnight raid that lasted nearly 6 hours on the morning of August 6. Survivors of the carnage count their losses.
They came with 2 trucks and carted away my food, couch, and mattresses. They came several times, and when they had taken all they wanted, they burned the house.
Martina Andrew narrowly escaped through the bushes to this nearby village when the gunmen raided her home. But her husband and 2 sons were not so fortunate. They were killed right here before the house was burned to the ground.
They came that night chanting, "The land is ours, the governor is ours." They killed my children and said they'll return and kill us all.
The fighting is mainly between nomadic settlers or herders and the people here who are predominantly farmers. Issues around land use and ownership are the root cause of the crisis. The sects are also divided along religious lines. An escalation in fighting which started early July has raised the death toll to nearly 200 people this year alone. Many more are being displaced every week. This camp opened with about 900 internally displaced people last month. Camp officials say a recent count shows more than 3,500 people now live here, and the number keeps growing. Nigerian authorities have deployed special forces to several flashpoints in the region and have so far arrested 8 suspects. But security experts blame Nigeria's justice system for the recurring violence.
Failure of the criminal justice system to punish offenders is the reason why the issue has persisted. Over time, when the first set of killings occurred, the criminal justice system failed to arrest the perpetrators or the instigators and to punish them. Unfortunately, the deterrence factor within our criminal justice system never worked. Others who saw, no one was punished, they also decided to start doing the same thing.
Unless peace is restored, many more villages could be attacked and victims like Martina will not return home for a long time. Timothy Obiezu for VOA News, Southern Kaduna in northwest Nigeria.
10 jailed Cameroon separatist leaders are appearing in court today, Thursday, for an appeal hearing on their life sentence. Separatist leader Sisiku Ayuk Tabe and 9 others were sentenced to life after they were convicted of terrorism and rebellion against Cameroon. The separatists are fighting for independence of Cameroon's 2 English-speaking regions. They were arrested in 2018 in Nigeria and deported to Cameroon. Amungwa Tani, spokesperson for the jailed separatist leaders' legal team, says Tabe and his fellow detainees have been denied their rights to a fair trial. Zambian Vice President Inonge Mutukwa on Wednesday tested positive for coronavirus. Her condition is stable and she is in self-isolation at home, according to a statement released by the president's office. The statement also says Mutukwa has mild symptoms that are being managed and that she is in high spirits and working virtually. The number of confirmed COVID-19 cases in Africa has surged to over 1.1 million people, as the death toll from the pandemic climbed past 26,000, according to Africa Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. The Africa CDC also says the number of people who have recovered from coronavirus has reached 859,000. South Africa leads the continent with 596,000 COVID-19 cases and just over 12,000 deaths, according to Johns Hopkins University data. Many insurers reject companies' COVID-19 claims, with some companies left short or with nothing. Emma McCarthy reports.
Abandoned and covered with litter, an impala meanders through Vine and Dutoy's safari camp in South Africa's Pilanesberg National Park. Coronavirus restrictions have left his business at the mercy of nature and its survival in the hands of an insurer who has rejected his claim. Facing billions of dollars in losses, insurers globally have decided to honour COVID-19 claims on business interruption policies, provoking pressure from regulators, mounting reputational damage and a wave of lawsuits from outraged customers. The interim relief payment Dutoy received from his insurer amounted to only 11% of his claim for over $170,000 and was spent on, amongst other things, on overdue wages and debts in a matter of hours.
Make no mistake, I'm grateful for that money because it takes a little bit of stress off me and a few of the other guys that I owed money to. But I'm in a position that if I had that payment or that cover paid out in March, I wouldn't have had this issue where I am now.
Insurers say their policies were not designed to cover the unprecedented fallout of the pandemic, and honouring claims in full could destabilise the industry. Dutoy's company and its 19 staff members was thrown a lifeline when South Africa opened provincial borders for all travel on Tuesday. But with many debts still to pay and a continual ban on international travel, it is going to be tough to stay afloat without a full payout. causing anxiety for workers like campsite host Thomas Mthisi.
If ever I lose this job, I won't be able to do a lot of things. Like I won't be able to pay for my, like school finances, and then as well as helping at home as well.
Du Toit's insurer, Santam, declined to comment.
That was Emma McCarthy of Reuters reporting. We're excited to hear what you think about Africa 54 and the stories we cover. Join the discussion on Facebook. The address is Africa 54. We're also streaming our broadcast live on Facebook. Please watch and share our show with your friends. Also check out our headlines 24/7 on voaafrica.com. Coming up, the mixed reactions to Beyonce's music film, Black is King. We'll be right back.
Hello, I'm Linor Moudou, your VOA health correspondent.
Let us be perfectly clear. All countries.
During the COVID-19 pandemic, the World Health Organization says there is no information or evidence suggesting that the coronavirus can be transmitted by mosquitoes.
There are 2 published studies.
It is a respiratory virus which spreads primarily through droplets, generated when an infected person coughs or sneezes, or through droplets of saliva or discharge from the nose.
This happens during pandemics in the past.
For more information on COVID-19, visit who.int or contact your local or national health authorities.
Welcome back to Africa 54. Gun violence, climate change, and COVID-19 are issues that highlighted on the night 3 of the Democratic National Convention Wednesday, when Senator Kamala Harris of California accepted the vice presidential nomination as running mate to candidate Joe Biden. VOA's Michael Sullivan reports viewers heard a litany of complaints against Republican President Donald Trump and conveyed through a virtual format.
I pledge allegiance to the flag.
An event held remotely because of the pandemic, featuring Democratic Party luminaries and supporters around the United States. It is an unconventional convention, said host Kerry Washington, a Hollywood actress, and its highlight was unprecedented, the first black woman and South Asian American to run on a major party ticket.
I accept your nomination for Vice President of the United States of America.
Nominee Joe Biden was featured in video clips, supported, among others, by Gabby Giffords, a former member of Congress who nearly died in a gun attack.
America needs all of us to speak out, even when you have to fight to find the words.
Donald Trump was criticized for harsh enforcement of immigration laws and the treatment of asylum seekers and undocumented migrants. Former presidential candidate Elizabeth Warren criticized his handling of the coronavirus pandemic.
Today, America has the most COVID deaths in the world and an economic collapse. And both crises are falling hardest on black and brown families.
Former President Barack Obama said Trump does not respect the diversity of the country or the importance of his job.
I did hope, for the sake of our country, that Donald Trump might show some interest in taking the job seriously. That he might come to feel the weight of the office and discover some reverence for the democracy that had been placed in his care. But he never did.
The previous Democratic nominee, Hillary Clinton, stressed the importance of voting.
Remember back in 2016 when Trump asked, "What do you have to lose?" Well, now we know. Our health care, our jobs, our loved ones.
The climate crisis.
Using social media for a nominating convention is experimental, but one media analyst says the format may be working.
Because I think some of the moments that might have seemed awkward or might have seemed like the picture was a little grainy, I think that's part of many of our lived experience now. And more to the point, is in fact how we are having relationships in some cases with coworkers, family members, people that we care about.
Reaching out to voters in a year of pandemic. Mike O'Sullivan, VOA News, Los Angeles.
Many countries, school administrators and families are facing the troubling problem of when and how to reopen schools. Opening up the schools with the lingering COVID danger is a difficult challenge. Sabah Shah Khan tries to find out if the students, parents, and schools are ready.
Only a few weeks left of the summer vacation, but in some ways, it feels like an extension of the school shutdowns that happened all across the United States in March.
There's more family time, but for school, it's just weird not getting to seeing your friends face to face.
The school break has been unique for this generation, but as the new school year is set to begin, the questions now are, when is it safe for kids to go back to school, or is virtual learning the way to go?
Sending kids to a setup where social distancing could not be followed, where a lot of kids from different families will come together, sounds risky. And as a parent and a doctor, I feel that should be the last step.
While Arnav is looking forward to seeing his friends, he's also afraid of bringing the virus home.
I'm scared of my family dying, like my elder people.
Chavi and her husband are both physicians. Because they work with COVID patients, the couple had a hard time finding babysitters during the summer break. According to a report by McKinsey & Company, 26.8 million people, that is 16% of the American workforce, depends on schools and childcare so they can work.
The fact is that schools and preschools play an important role in the U.S. economy. As per the National Center for Education Statistics, more than 56.6 million students will attend primary, middle, and high schools across the country.
But with uncertainty about the spread of the virus, many school districts are looking for the safest option to reopen, while ensuring that children move ahead with their learning. The decision lies with many of America's 98,000 school superintendents.
A lot of our teachers and a lot of our parents are asking for a virtual option. There's differing opinions on what's acceptable as far as social distancing space between 3 feet and 6 feet, and whether we can have congregate eating or sports contact or anything of the like.
The lack of funding and resources poses a challenge for other school districts with limited resources. Harris's district has 1,000 students. 300 do not have computers at home, while 40 don't have access to the internet. There's also worry about the economic impact of not opening schools.
Well, if we shutter schools, now parents are home with their kids and that they can't go to work. And now the food lines get longer and longer and longer.
Despite all the uncertainty and stress, these high school students found joy, even though they graduated months behind schedule.
We're thankful that we can have a graduation. Obviously, it's not the ideal situation, but we're making the most of it.
The students are still hopeful despite the pandemic. Sabah Shah Khan, VOA News, Voorhees, New Jersey.
Beyonce's musical film, Black is King, is gaining global fans and critics for its portrayal of African culture. In South Africa, where several scenes in the 85-minute feature were filmed, many say it's more than just a movie. VOA's Anita Powell reports from Johannesburg.
Unlike any other.
Black is King is a new visual album and musical film directed, executive produced, and written by American singer-songwriter Beyoncé. The film stands alongside her album The Lion King, The Gift. It was shot last year in the U.S., South and West Africa, and Europe, and features many African artists. The film, released in July, has been generally well received by audiences, but it does have its critics. Some say that Beyoncé, who was born in the U.S. city of Houston, in Texas, is guilty of cultural appropriation for using African imagery throughout the work without having any specific cultural roots to the continent. But in South Africa, those involved in the production were thrilled.
I'm really, really honored to have become part of the crew that put together this film. And on my side, I really, really like the film. I really love the film. It went into a lot of things that we haven't been told in our schools about Black history. And when like I saw the film, that's when I started to see that the stories and the attires and outfits that she was putting, and the whole scene really represented something deeper than what people were expecting.
While the film is not widely available on the continent, South Africa's largest cable provider made it available to premium subscribers. Beyonce fan Kosi Mutukwa says African diaspora, including Black Americans, have the right to reference what some see as African culture. The founder of a project to tell queer narratives, Mutukwa says he mostly loved the film.
Like, there are areas where I felt like Black is King could have been improved. For example, as a queer person, I would have loved to see more. I know she worked with a lot of queer people, but I would have liked to see that representation on camera.
Beyonce's picture of Black culture and power comes as U.S. Democrat Senator Kamala Harris became the first Black woman vice presidential pick.
Black women have always been on the lowest sort of like strata of social hierarchy. And to have them occupy these really key, critical, profoundly influential platforms is really, it's heartening and it's encouraging.
Student filmmaker Matebula says Beyonce's film inspired him to work on his own project, to tell more African stories. On one thing, her African supporters agree. If Black is king, Beyonce is the queen. Anita Powell, VOA News, Johannesburg.
That's our show for today. Please watch Africa 54 on our website at voaafrica.com. From all of us here in Washington, thank you for watching.
We survive the future, real Mr. Soprano. You know what it is, the records. Get it on. Too many haters started, I ain't gonna be haters.